Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the dust-choked fields of ancient China, where you wake up in a canvas tent that smells like damp straw, boiled cabbage, and sweat-soaked leather. You blink at the early morning haze filtering through the slits in the fabric and remember what day it is. Somewhere a rooster is crowing, which feels wildly optimistic considering the number of assassins that may or may not be encamped today. He tells you Lord Cao wants you in the command tent. His eyes are sharp and his mood is sharper. Reports from the east, he says, tossing you a scroll sealed with red wax. Read it. Bandits, or maybe a sneak move from Sun Quan. You scan for clues, burned grain silos, dead horses. Missing silver, now. Great. No breakfast, no brushing your teeth with salt and twigs. Just straight to the war table. The terrain near the outpost is hilly and full of ravines. Perfect for ambush. You suggest moving a small unit to secure the southern pass and placing decoy carts along the northern ridge to trick future attackers. You toss off your blanket and stand, cracking your back, a turtle with a coin in its mouth. Good luck, supposedly. Historians still argue whether such charms were widely believed among warlords, or just desk clutter for anxious generals. You reach for it, but stop yourself. Touching Cao Cao's desk uninvited is not a career-advancing move. The air is cool, laced with smoke from the cook fires. I want to know if my men are hungry, lazy, or dying. You throw on your outer robe and belt your sword, even though everyone knows you barely passed fencing class. You already feel the weight of the day pressing down on your shoulders, and this is just the start. For now, you lean into the saddle, blink away the rising dust, and head toward your next headache. A soldier walks past carrying a bucket full of boiled pig trotters. Another is dragging a broken spear like it personally offended him. You mount a shaggy horse that smells like sadness and saddle oil and ride off toward the edge of camp. You're not a farmer or a monk or even some low-level clerk scribbling tax scrolls in Luoyang. Your stomach growls. Too bad. You'll eat when the empire is safe. The men are building makeshift barricades and muttering about ghosts in the woods. He confirms the silence, the lack of bird song, and adds that one of the dogs refuses to go near that area. Historians still argue whether ancient armies used animals for early warning signs, but your gut says yes. You scribble a quick note to suggest setting traps near the quiet forest. Just in case. Ghosts. Classic. The Three Kingdoms was full of superstitions. There is even a fringe tale about Cao Cao having a secret ghost caller who helped him win battles. But most scholars dismiss it as campfire nonsense. Still, when a soldier whispers that the trees to the west have gone silent since last night, you take mental note. Or when Cao Cao forgets he sent you out here. No, you are Cao Cao's military advisor, and today you are expected to help shape the fate of the Three Kingdoms. No pressure, just history, blood, and about 5,000 ways to mess up. Outside, soldiers are already banging spears on wooden shields in their morning drills. A young aide arrives and bows so fast his forehead nearly hits the ground. Inside the tent, Cao Cao is already hunched over a massive map that smells faintly of goat hide. You do. It's bad. One of the supply outposts was attacked in the night. Cao Cao drums his fingers. Suggestions? You want to say, how about we go back to bed? But instead you squint at the map. He nods slowly. Zunyu said the same. At least you're not completely useless. That's his version of a compliment. As you turn to leave, you catch sight of a strange little carving sitting on the table's edge. He waves you off. Check the front lines next. Outside, the sun is climbing and the sounds of camp life swell. The soldiers salute as you pass. You give them a nod, trying to look wise. A few minutes in, you reach the outer lines. You dismount and talk to the guard captain, a grizzled man missing part of his ear. Back on your horse, you ride toward the next checkpoint. If you survive this, you're either very lucky, very smart, or very good at pretending to be both. You press your knees into the flanks of your reluctant horse and ride east toward the edge of camp, where the front lines are held together with rope, grit, and the occasional miracle. The terrain flattens here, but that doesn't make you feel safer. It just means enemy arrows can fly farther without hitting a tree. The camp perimeter is a mess of sharpened stakes, burnt tree stumps, and latrines dug far too close to the cook fires. You pass a line of archers practicing with straw targets. Most hit the hay. One hits a colleague's helmet. You make a mental note, maybe reassign that one to latrine duty. The forest in question lies near a bend in the river, a perfect spot to stage an ambush. You circle it with your finger. How often do your scouts check this area? The frontline tent sits low and patched, like everything else here. The ground is damp but undisturbed. No fresh footprints, no broken twigs, no birds. And maybe sleep with my sword. You kneel, brush away some leaves, and spot something odd. A tiny shard of red lacquer, possibly from a bow, not yours. Not friendly. They're young, one barely old enough to grow a mustache. Another chews salted plum and talks about a dream he had where the river turned to wine and Cao Cao walked across it in golden shoes. Fringe story? Absolutely. Sleep-deprived nonsense? Also yes. Inside, the officer in charge is hunched over a scroll, picking fleas from his sleeve and squinting like the paper personally insulted him. You smile politely but make a note to ask the supply officers later. You never know. On your way back to the main camp, you stop to inspect a newly built lookout tower. It wobbles like a drunk on stilts. You climb anyway. He greets you with a grunt and offers something that might have once been tea. It tastes like wet moss. You nod and step outside to inspect the area yourself. The mountains to the west look calm, but a thin thread of smoke curls up in the distance. Campfire, signal, arson. You file it away for the evening report. You wonder how many campaigns were lost because someone couldn't draw a decent map. Historians still debate whether strategy in this era was driven more by personal genius or lucky guesses. Your horse hates you for it, and you can't blame him. You grab a leftover rice ball from a passing soldier. It's cold and tastes like damp gravel, but you chew anyway. You'll need the energy. The moment you dismount, another aide hands you a damp cloth and a sarcastic smile. You'll need that. They're shouting again. A thin mist clings to the trees, and the silence is loud. Even your horse seems hesitant to go near. You dismount and tie the reins to a rock, trying not to think about ghost stories or wild rumors of enemy scouts who wear wolf pelts and move like smoke. Historians still argue whether such elite vanguard units actually existed or whether they were exaggerated tailies meant to scare peasants. What if we fake the bait with decoys and keep the main strength hidden in the gully? He points to a crude sketch on the table. One wants to split forces and flank. The other wants to bait and encircle. You quietly step to the side, trying not to draw attention. It doesn't work. Forest too quiet, he says. Been that way for 2 nights. Birds gone, bugs gone. Something's off. You lean over the map. Twice a day. No one's gone in since yesterday morning, which explains the jumpy mood. You take a few steps into the tree line, heart beating just slightly too loud. Back at the frontline tent, you report this to the officer. He frowns deeply. I'll double the watch tonight. Good idea, you say, pretending that was already your plan. You stay a while longer, chatting with soldiers near the barricades. One man pulls you aside and whispers about the 5th fire, a superstition among certain troops who believe that when 5 fires burn unevenly at night, it signals betrayal in the ranks. As the sun climbs, the air grows heavy with the stink of sweat, smoke, and something faintly rotting. You try not to breathe through your nose. At the top, you can see the whole valley. A messenger scrambles up the ladder behind you, panting. Lord Cao wants you back. No, says Zun Yu is throwing scrolls again. Wonderful. You ride back at a brisk pace. You duck into the command tent where Cao Cao and Zun Yu are halfway through an argument about troop formations. Cao Cao points at you. Well, you've seen the front. What do you think? Everyone turns. You swallow. Splitting forces risks overextension. Encircling only works if they take the bait. The room falls quiet. Zun Yu blinks. Cao Cao raises an eyebrow. Acceptable? That's high praise. As the meeting wraps up, you catch a glimpse of a battle plan sketched in ink and charcoal. It's detailed, messy, and entirely outdated. Back outside, you stretch your arms and yawn. Still no breakfast, and probably a helmet. By the time you arrive at the central command hut again, Zun Yu is pacing like a scholar who's misplaced his inkstone. Scrolls are scattered across the floor. One has a footprint on it, which may or may not be yours. Tell me you agree. The river path offers better logistics than marching over land. He turns to you the moment you enter. But there's a catch. Boats mean visibility, you reply. And visibility means arrows. Finally, someone with sense, he says, while waving a chart that looks like it was drawn by a tipsy cartographer. Children, he mutters, stop bickering. You'll frighten the aides. You squint at the map. He's not wrong. The river would be smoother, faster, and slightly less muddy than the northern road. He groans. You think like a coward. I think like someone who doesn't want to end up floating face down in a tributary. You suggest a middle ground, place reserves near the old granary, which offers elevation and cover. Cao Cao nods. Approved. Also, we need someone to speak with the supply quartermaster. They're hiding salt again. Cao Cao strides in at that moment, holding a cup of wine and an expression that says he's already had enough politics for the day. Cao Cao wants to know why salt rations are behind again. You both quiet. Zun Yu sits. You sit. Inside, a short brown man in a hat 3 sizes too large greets you with the enthusiasm of a hungover goose. Advisor, he wheezes, to what do I owe this majestic intrusion? You find a fresh scroll detailing troop movement from the western hills. You read quickly, fingers tightening. There was a minor clash near a shrine. No deaths, but 2 horses bolted and 1 cart flipped. The interesting part? No enemy seen. The air is thick with the scent of ink and impatience. The debate shifts to whether to station reserve troops in the west or keep them behind the main camp. Finally, you follow the scent of millet porridge and fermented beans to a shaded pavilion where a few other officials are already seated, slumped, or asleep upright. You know what that means. Time to play the part of diplomat, investigator, and mildly threatening bureaucrat. The food is bland, but you're so hungry you don't care. Halfway through, 2 junior scribes behind you start whispering. At first, you ignore them. Then you hear the words missing scroll and spy. You head off to the quartermaster's tent, a low, sagging thing that smells like pickled radish and old promises. You smile thinly. He sighs because the teamsters swapped labels on the barrels. I have vinegar where there should be brine and barley where there should be nothing. Either way, this one sounds real. You jot a note on your sleeve. He opens a barrel to prove it. Sure enough, it's vinegar. You gag slightly. Fix it. Yes, yes. I'll beat the apprentice responsible and relabel everything by sundown. You raise an eyebrow. Just fix it. No beatings unless it's absolutely deserved. Of course, he says, already picking up a stick. Back at the command tent, Zun Yu is gone, thank heaven. You circle the note and show it to Cao Cao. He scans it and chuckles. Ghosts again, could be scouts testing our lines, you say. He grins, or bored locals playing soldier. You both know it's probably the former. Still, it never hurts to pretend. As you turn to leave, a page brings word that lunch is being served. You sit, you chew, your ears perk up. You casually sip your soup, then lean back and whisper, repeat that, slowly. One scribe gulps. We think someone took one of the campaign plans last night, from Zun Yu's collection. He's been fuming since dawn. Interesting, very interesting. Historians still argue whether intelligence leaks during the Three Kingdoms were caused by internal betrayal or poor security. You return to Cao Cao's side. Might be a breach, a scroll missing. He raises an eyebrow. Find it. Great. Another problem. Just what you needed after vinegar barrels and rivers full of imaginary ghosts. You march back across the camp with a fresh headache blooming behind your eyes. The midday sun has turned the tents into ovens, and your robes are now sticking to places you didn't know could sweat. As you approach the archive tent, where all scrolls are supposed to be logged and guarded, you already know it's going to be a mess. The guard at the entrance is chewing on something that looks suspiciously like yesterday's pork rind. He salutes with a lazy flick of his spear. Anything strange last night, you ask? He squints at the sky, thinking hard. Saw a cat. A cat. Could have been a raccoon. Helpful. The last guy sneezed and we lost all of March. Inside the tent, it smells like mildew, ink, and the faint anxiety of underpaid scribes. Piles of bamboo slips and paper scrolls are stacked in haphazard towers that defy gravity and common sense. You navigate carefully to the desk at the back, where a frazzled archivist is trying to balance a charcoal stick behind each ear. One was misfiled in the poetry section, which explains why Cao Cao nearly attacked his own lyricist. The tent has two flaps. One faces the command quarter. The other opens onto the servant path near the latrines. He looks up with wide eyes. Please don't burn anything. You assure him you're only here for answers. He wrings his hands and admits that last night was chaotic. A few scrolls were returned late, again. The sun is brutal now, and the ground is dry enough to crack. You pass cooks hauling buckets of turnips, armor polishers covered in soot, and one man arguing with a goose. You ask for the logbook and start comparing entries. Most match. One doesn't. A scroll labeled Southern River Ambush, Contingency A as missing. You tap the page with your finger. Who signed it out? He meant to return it, but got distracted by her hairpin collection. The archivist frowns. No one. Which means someone took it without logging. You glance around. Lovely. The scroll is intact, though it now smells faintly of camphor oil and embarrassment. You bring it back to Cao Cao, who reads the title, sighs, and says nothing for a solid 10 seconds. Fresh recruits have arrived. You catch him trying to hide behind a basket of damp socks. You greet the drill captain, a mountain of a man named Hu. He grins at you with a face like a sandstone wall. You send a page to notify Cao Cao and head toward the servant quarters. At the laundry tent, you find your next lead, a junior scribe named Tian, who was spotted loitering outside the archives well after curfew. I didn't take anything, he blurts before you even speak. Classic. What to do when someone yells, incoming, and is not just a badly thrown rice ball. They nod, wide-eyed, sweat trickling down their faces. You raise an eyebrow. Funny, I didn't say what was missing. He freezes. Long story short, Tian admits he borrowed the scroll to impress a girl from the counting tent who likes military talk. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Where is it now? In my satchel, under my bed, probably. You retrieve it yourself, fighting through the stink of old boots and crushed radishes. Then, without looking at you, he mutters, "You're promoted to scroll recovery specialist." You're pretty sure that's not a real title? Later, after a tepid cup of barley tea and a hard biscuit that threatens to break your molars, you're summoned to the training yard. You find them lined up like ducks in a thunderstorm, half holding spears upside down, and the other half trying not to vomit from nerves. You teach them tactics, he growls. I teach them to stand straight. Fair enough. You launch into the basics. Formation spacing, signaling with flags. Then someone asks the dreaded question, what if we die in the first charge? You pause. It's a fair question, realistic, maybe too realistic. You crouch down, meet their eyes, and say, then make your death cost the enemy more than your life did. They stare at you like you've just cast a spell. Then they straighten up, just a little. Historians still argue whether advisors actually taught battlefield psychology or if that's a modern gloss. Either way, you feel oddly proud and a little hungry again. As the sun begins to dip, a runner arrives with a new summons. "Dinner with the envoy from Liu Bao," he says, out of breath. And you're sitting next to him. Of course you are. You dust off your robes and splash your face with cold water from a nearby basin. Diplomacy requires a clean appearance, or at least a slightly less disheveled one. He's wearing robes far too clean for this place and has the kind of thin mustache that suggests he is either a poet or someone who desperately wants to be mistaken for one. The dinner is being held in a side pavilion draped in red silk banners which sway gently in the breeze like they, trying to distract everyone from the fact that this is still a military camp full of trench foot and lice. The envoy from Liu Bao is already seated, sipping from a clay cup with theatrical grace. Across the table, Zun Yu is pretending not to stare at the envoy's ornate scroll case. You're pretending not to think about spies, and how one of his guards once scared off a tiger by reciting Confucian poetry. Historians still argue whether any such tiger-reciting bodyguards existed, or if this is just the kind of story envoys tell to seem braver than they are. You bow, introduce yourself with the calm dignity of someone who hasn't to chase down a scroll from under a laundry basket, and take your seat beside him. Dinner is a modest affair: barley cakes, salted fish, and a bowl of sour vegetable soup that smells like old ambition. I heard rumors that your army is preparing to cross the river, but surely that's just talk, yes? The envoy smiles at you. A fine day for strategy and fermented turnips, wouldn't you say? The air is cooler now and the moon has begun to rise. If he wasn't, then someone's trying to frame him. Neither option is particularly comforting. You walk toward the supply quartermaster's tent, not because you need to, but because you want to think without eyes on you. You pretend not to notice that he's watching your reaction more than your words. In war, the river is never just a river. One nods and points to a crate delivered from the envoy's entourage. "For writing letters home," they said. You nod politely, trying not to make a face as you chew a mouthful that tastes suspiciously like regret. He flips it open, closes it, then flips it open again. Nervous? Calculated? You can't tell. Cao Cao is seated a few spots down, laughing at a joke someone made about court musicians. You ask the envoy about his journey. He launches into a tale about treacherous roads, cunning bandits. He leans toward you, lowering his voice. You give him a vague smile. But at least for now, no one is stabbing each other. Yet, he chuckles and sips his soup. Later in the evening, he pulls out a fan painted with cranes and plum blossoms. But you do notice a small ink stain on his sleeve, one that looks fresh. And the ink smells like the same charcoal used on your stolen scroll earlier. You excuse yourself and step outside the pavilion. If the envoy was involved in the scroll theft, it could be a sign of deeper espionage. You stop by the scribe's quarters and quietly ask if any new ink deliveries were made in the last day. Interesting. As you head back, Cao Cao intercepts you. "How's our guest?" he asks, voice low. "Polished, poetic, possibly dangerous." He nods. All the best people are. You both share a look that says, "Keep digging." Before the night ends, you write a short memo recommending increased watch on all correspondences leaving camp. You don't accuse anyone directly, yet. Back in your tent, you finally sit. The cushion is lumpy, the lamp is dim, and your soup bowl from earlier is now home to a very ambitious beetle. Historians still argue whether camp dinners among rival states were more about alliances or information gathering. You're leaning toward the latter, and you still haven't had dessert. You barely have time to yawn before another page finds you. "Lady Bian has arrived," he whispers, looking pale. She requests your presence immediately. Sharp as a spearhead, quiet as a cat in slippers. She rarely visits the front, and when she does, something is always about to change. You smooth your robes, grab your fan, and mentally prepare to answer questions you're not allowed to dodge. You blink, Lady Bien, Cao Cao's wife. She gestures for you to sit, her face unreadable, but her eyes always 2 steps ahead. She's waiting in the garden tent, which has been quickly assembled with brocade cushions and bowls of plum tea that smell far too delicate for a war camp. I trust your evening was productive, she says. You nod, mostly scrolls, fish, and veiled threats. She smiles just slightly, sounds like court. She waves away the attendants and leans forward. Cao Cao plans to send our son to the southern garrison. I want your honest opinion. Will he come back with more than blisters and trauma? You pause. Rose petal, perhaps. Not something the kitchen usually produces unless bribed. That's a trap. A polite, silk-wrapped, logic-snaring trap. Some say Cao Cao's recent victories have made him overconfident. Others worry he won't know when to stop. And if loyalty cannot be bought, if we cannot secure local loyalty, no amount of training will keep him safe. If today is any indication, she's steering more than she lets on. You pick your words carefully. He is brave, but the South is volatile. You wait until you're far enough away to read it. Lady Bien steadies you. Nothing suspicious yet, but your mental alarm bells tinkle like wind chimes before a storm or extra exits. You fold it again and tuck it under your belt. Then perhaps it can be rented, you answer. If I dismiss one of the regional commanders, how long before someone starts an uprising? She chuckles. I like that. Passing soldiers singing bawdy songs and a squad. Practicing spear throws into a straw dummy that someone has dressed in a red robe. Symbolism, or just creative stress relief? You sip your tea, which is astonishingly good. She taps her fingers on the table. There are factions forming in the officer ranks. I hear whispers. You exhale slowly. He is not the kind of man who stops. Only the kind who redirects. Historians still argue whether Lady Bien played a direct role in political strategy or merely acted through subtle influence. She nods, then glances toward the tent flap. I trust you to protect his name. He just looks at you, the question obvious, even when he's wrong. Especially Ben. With that, she dismisses you, but not before slipping a folded note into your palm. 3 names, officers, all recently promoted, all quietly requesting extra security, ... Outside, you spot one of the named officers talking to a grain supplier in hushed tones. You make your way to Cao Cao's tent. Inside, Cao Cao is pacing. I need your opinion. You consider. That depends on how loudly you dismiss him. He laughs. So ... keep it quiet. Like a funeral with good wine. You hand him the note from Lady Bien. He scans it, then tucks it into his sleeve. Of course she knows. She always knows. A runner bursts in, 2 scouts missing. The northern ridge. You don't even flinch. 3rd time this week. Cao Cao doesn't speak. You nod. I'll go. Because at this point, you might as well start charging for field trips. The northern ridge is not far, but the walk there feels longer when you're anticipating bodies. Or worse, nothing at all. The path twists through dry brush, broken stumps, and the occasional fox darting away at your footsteps. 2 guards flank you, neither eager to speak. You can't blame them. The last patrol went missing without so much as a scream. You reach the outpost as the sun begins to turn amber. The guardhouse is barely more than a lean-to of bamboo and canvas, but it offers a decent view of the terrain below. Mountains in the distance, river bend to the east, silence everywhere else. The sergeant on duty greets you with a nod, clearly relieves someone with rank has arrived. No word from the scouts. They were due back this morning. You peer into the forested ravine beyond the ridge. It's not thick, but the shadows fall quickly. Even the insects seem unwilling to comment on your journey. You find boot prints along the edge of a creek heading west, then a broken twig, then nothing. This ridge may be haunted after all, though not by ghosts. That sounds simple until you see what the diviner's setup involves. A brazier, a split turtle shell, dozens of burned reed stalks. He begins chanting. You suspect traps. Psychological or physical, doesn't matter. Nearby, you see a small bundle, dried meat, a flint kit, and a charm in the shape of a fish. Just disappearance, superstition. Soldiers from the eastern provinces often carry these for luck. Historians still debate whether such charms offered comfort or false confidence. In this case, neither worked. You motion for the sergeant to stay put and decide to follow the route yourself. A terrible idea, probably, but at this point it's become a theme. As you descend into the trees, the noise of camp disappears, until you spot it. Half hidden beneath leaves, a signal flag, red and yellow. Standard issue? You kneel to pick it up. You suspect it's both. The fire tells you what you want to hear. The cracks just add flair. You get the feeling the real storm hasn't even started. A group is gathered around a fire, listening to an old man tell a story about a general who once buried fake gold to lure enemy spies. You smile. That story ends badly for everyone involved. A fire broke out at a way station, destroying several crates of dry grain. No casualties, no witnesses. You can hear owls in the distance, or maybe they're just your imagination. He's old, hunched, and smells faintly of ash and turtle shell. He grins when he sees you, revealing only 2 teeth. No blood, no struggle. You return to the outpost and order 2 runners to alert camp command. Back at the main camp, you're met by an unlikely companion, the royal diviner. You have a shadow walking beside you, he says cheerfully. Delightful, you answer, resisting the urge to back away. Cao Cao had ordered a reading to determine whether the weather tomorrow would allow troop movement. You sit nearby, sipping what might be barley tea or might be muddy water. The flames crackle, the shell pops. The old man squints. Dry wind tomorrow, northward, good for smoke. Bad for arrows. You raise an eyebrow. How bad? Arrows will stray. Great. So much for that long-range plan. He adds, also, someone in your camp is dreaming of wolves. You wait. And that means ... He smiles, shrugs, and walks away. Helpful. Historians still argue whether weather readings through turtle shells were reliable or elaborate ways to justify gut instincts. That night, a message comes from the southern supply line. Too convenient. You suggest doubling the guards and staggering shipments to prevent sabotage. Cao Cao agrees, but doesn't look happy. His brow is furrowed like a plowed field. As you walk back to your tent, you pass the soldiers' mess. You reach your cot, collapse onto it, and stare at the ceiling. Either way, you decide to sleep with your boots on tonight. The morning begins not with sunlight, but shouting. A loud, panicked voice yells your name outside your tent. The recruits. Fighting. You sit up, still in your boots, and push aside the flap to find a boy no older than 15, clutching a scroll so tightly it's crumpled. The training yard is chaos. 2 squads of fresh recruits are in a brawl, flinging fists and insults, while a few terrified officers try to separate them with the authority of slightly annoyed librarians. There's trouble in the training yard, he gasps, a sore subject. Things escalated from name-calling to punches to what someone describes as a flying radish incident. You don't ask. But effective line you can think of, if you have energy to fight each other, you have energy to clean latrines. You follow him at a jog, weaving through half-awake soldiers and spilled wash buckets. You march in and bellow, "Enough!" Louder than you knew you could. Everyone freezes. You prefer the method that doesn't involve anyone losing teeth before battle. No official declaration, just a veiled threat written in calligraphy that's both elegant and passive-aggressive. You bring it to Cao Cao. You learn that one recruit insulted another's province. That province, it turns out, lost a major battle last year. You separate the groups, assign extra chores, and deliver the most tired. You chew on flatbread and dried turnip while watching a group of officers rehearse formation drills with wooden swords. They move stiffly like puppets on a bad day. You offer a few corrections, and one officer responds, "We're soldiers, not dancers." Groans all around. Order, at least, is temporarily restored. When they surround you because your lines fell apart, most are serviceable. Some have chipped edges. One has a suspicious stain that might be plum sauce. You make a note to investigate. We walked into silence, and then nothing. I ran. Historians still debate how often discipline was enforced with chores versus physical punishment. Later that morning, you meet with the quartermaster again, this time to inspect the armory. Spears, swords, shields. The young man is pale, his arm bandaged, his eyes wild. The three of you sit around the command table, scrolls laid out like battle scars. He mutters something about shadows and dogs that didn't bark. While there, a soldier approaches with news. A messenger arrived from the east. Urgent. You read the sealed note. A neighboring warlord is claiming part of your supply route. He reads it, snorts, and says, "So he wants to play diplomat. Fine. We'll send him a fruit basket filled with rocks." You stop to watch a soldier carve his name into the wooden handle of his spear. A superstition, a claim of self, something to hold on to when things fall apart. You draft a more polite response and suggest sending a low-level envoy who can stall while you reroute supplies. If anything happens to them, you'll know your traitor isn't just careless. He's active. Cao Cao approves and casually mentions you'll be the one writing the envoy's script. You nod. Of course. Midday brings a short break. Tell that to the enemy, you reply. He grumbles but adjusts his stance. As the sun hits its peak, another report arrives. One of the scouts has returned. You rush to the medic tent. You sit beside him, speak gently. Tell me what you saw. He shakes his head. They were waiting. They knew our route. You ask how they could have known the patrol pattern. He doesn't answer, just looks toward the ceiling like it might explain the universe. You leave the tent troubled. If the enemy knows your routes, someone's talking or watching, or both. That evening, you meet again with Cao Cao and Zun Yu. We have a leak. You say. Cao Cao taps the hilt of his sword. Then let's plug it, Zun Yu adds, or feed it false information. Let's see what leaks next. You all agree. A decoy patrol will be dispatched tomorrow, following a new secret route. The night ends with a quiet walk past the campfire lines. You understand that. Dawn breaks cold and sharp. You're already awake, boots laced, cloak thrown over your shoulders as the decoy patrol forms near the eastern gate. 12 men, 3 on horseback. All briefed with a fake route designed to look just real enough to tempt a spy. You watch them disappear into the rising mist, their armor clinking like coins in a shaking purse. Then you wait. You spend the time pretending to review logistics scrolls, but your eyes keep drifting toward the camp's main road. The spy, whoever they are, has to act fast. You just hope they're greedy. Hours pass. At midday, a message arrives. One of the horses from the decoy patrol has returned without its rider. You sprint to the stables, heart pounding. The horse is sweating, panicked, and its saddle is blood-streaked. That's enough confirmation. You sound the alarm. You said this was a test, he growls. All men who had access to the fake route documents. Only 7, narrow enough to manage. Questions are precise. Who signed what? Who saw which scroll? Who delivered which orders? Now I have blood for proof. Congratulations. Cao Cao meets you in the war tent. You bow. Now we know the leak is internal. Zun Yu arrives moments later, carrying a short list of names. Interrogations begin immediately. You stand in the corner of the command pavilion as each officer is brought in. The camp has seen enough smoke and shadows. They're ready for fire. But there's one mistake: a scrap of paper in his brazier, half burned, bearing the symbol for the Eastern Pass, only found on the forged map. By the fourth man, a pattern emerges. One name keeps recurring, not overtly, but always nearby. The kind of order that smells like a cover story. Captain Han, quartermaster liaison, technically harmless, practically invisible. You and Zun Yu pay him a visit. His tent is immaculate. Too immaculate. Han is polite, calm, too calm. Strange about the patrol, he says. Terrible luck. You watch him closely. His hands don't fidget. His voice doesn't waver. You fish it out with tongs. Cao Cao doesn't hesitate. Bind him. Han is dragged out screaming about misunderstandings and forged notes. Nobody listens. Historians still argue whether Cao Cao handled spies with justice or vengeance. Today, it feels like both. His sentence is posted at every gate, not for betrayal, but for cowardice. It hurts more. His name becomes a joke before it becomes a warning. Later, you sit with Zun Yu under a tree near the armory. He's unusually quiet. Zun Yu says nothing, but his look is heavier than usual. Somewhere along the line, you became the kind of person who orchestrates fear. You did well, he finally says. But this won't be the last. You nod. Spies are weeds. Pull one and another grows. He laughs bitterly. We need better soil. You return to your tent hoping for rest, only to be summoned once more, this time by a messenger bearing the crest of Lady Bian. You find her by the stream, feeding fish with crumbs from a lacquered box. She doesn't look up. Han's arrest will not be enough, she says. People will whisper. You must make them afraid to repeat him. How? Stage the punishment. Let the blood speak where words can't. You hesitate. That's theatrical. She turns, eyes calm as stone. So is power. The next morning, Han is marched through camp in chains. Cao Cao thanks you with a nod. You return to your tent and sit alone, the punishment echoing in your thoughts. And you still haven't had proper sleep. The camp wakes slowly the next day, quieter than usual. No songs, fewer jokes. The execution, or rather, the spectacle of shame, has settled into everyone's bones. They're bright, ambitious, and terrified of making mistakes in front of you. One of them accidentally suggests marching troops over a marsh. You raise an eyebrow. He corrects himself mid-sentence. You can feel it in the air like fog that won't lift. Morale is steady but stiff. No one wants to be the next Han. Today's agenda, a surprise raid. He wants to hit a southern storehouse controlled by remnants of Yuan Shao's forces. The warehouse isn't heavily defended, but it's nestled between two ridges, both rumored to be mined with traps. You spend the morning reviewing maps with a group of junior officers. Smart lad. Overgrown, but clear enough to move at night. You pick men who move like ghosts and know the difference between courage and stupidity. Around noon, Cao Cao calls you to the strategy tent. Fast in, fast out, he says. Minimal force. Maximum noise. You're tasked with planning the route and choosing the strike team. They're calm, methodical, and weirdly cheerful. One is singing a love song about a melon vendor and her very dangerous knives. You let it slide. While reviewing the area's topography, you spot something odd on the old maps, a footpath that doesn't appear on recent ones. It curves behind a hill and runs parallel to a creek. You send a scout to verify. He returns an hour later, breathless and excited. It's real. Perfect. You update the plan. Use the footpath as the entrance, fake a frontal attack to draw attention, and then burn the storehouse on retreat. The crackle reminds you of the scroll Han tried to burn. The betrayal still lingers, like oil that won't wash out. Quick, surgical, a slap in the face, not a punch to the gut. Cao Cao smiles when he hears it. You're finally learning how to be cruel. You grin back. I had good teachers. Historians still debate whether Cao Cao's raids were strategic masterpieces or just lucky stabs in the dark. The truth, as always, probably lives somewhere in between. They've developed a new type of siege bolt. Heavier, flatter tip, designed to tear through wooden doors without piercing straight through. You nod in approval. Little things win big battles. As you leave the tent, a runner hands you a note from the engineering corps. Later that evening, you check in on the troops prepping for the raid. You give a final walkthrough of the plan, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. Emphasis on timing, signals, fallback points. One soldier asks, "What if we get stuck in the valley?" You tap the stick once, then you don't, because you're smarter than whoever's waiting. He swallows hard and nods. That night, you sit beside the fire, staring into the flames. Cao Cao joins you without a word. He tosses a pebble into the fire. "Tomorrow," he says. You nod. Neither of you says anything else for a long time. Morning comes, and with it, the raid. You're not on the front lines. Instead, you're standing on the observation hill, far enough to stay alive, close enough to see what goes wrong. Then, from the hidden path, your main force slips through the brush like ghosts with torches. You've barely slept. Your breath fogs in the cold air. Cao Cao stands beside you, silent, arms folded. One of the ridges erupts in dirt and flame. Traps, old and unstable. You spot 3 men limping back through the creek bed. One carried, one missing. The raid begins just before sunrise. The fake assault draws attention exactly as planned. Horns blare. Figures move in the distance. The first plume of smoke curls into the sky. You nod. Phase 1, successful. Moments later, a thunderous crack echoes through the valley. Cao Cao squints through his spyglass. Minimal losses, he says. Could have been worse. Some want to know why the enemy knew about one of the fallback routes. You frown. That part wasn't in the leak. You nod again, though, your gut twists. 3 men is still 3 too many. The storehouse burns beautifully. Enemy flags crackle into cinders, a small satisfaction. The returning troops move quickly, disciplined. No songs this time. When they return to camp, the men are met with cheers, but also questions. Cao Cao pulls you aside. There's still another. He stutters, fumbles for excuses, but you already see it in his eyes. Spy. You're not sure, but you saw fear do more today than violence. A missing line showing a slope too steep to climb. The enemy had to know that. A single intact scroll protected in an oilskin bundle. It's not yours. It's from the enemy. A ledger, possibly, or someone careless. He gestures for you to investigate. Again, you may have just pulled the corner of a much larger curtain. A public reprimand, loss of rank, reassignment to night watch with no armor. He's humiliated and alive. You begin with the map archive. Everything is logged. Every copy tracked, except one recent patrol map is missing a notation. Just one, a tiny oversight. You summon the officer who drew that map. He wasn't a spy. He was just lazy. You sit by the edge of camp and watch fireflies blink lazily over the grass. Cao Cao listens to the report and scowls. We'll lose battles from ink before we lose them to blades. The officer is punished, not harshly. Just enough. Historians still argue whether this kind of mistake was treated too lightly or too cruelly. Later, while inspecting the ruins of the raid site, you find something odd. Supplies, routes, names. You bring it back to camp. Zanyu reads it and raises his eyebrows. This is better than we hoped. It is a full list of the enemy's supply lines and coded notations that match other reports. Think it's bait? You ask. Possibly, but if it is, it's clever bait. Cao Cao has it copied, triple-checked, then sealed. That night, you finally allow yourself a drink, just one. Rice wine, warmed slightly. You think of the 3 men lost. Then of the hundreds who might now be saved. It's never simple. But tonight it feels like the ledger was worth it. The next morning, a storm rolls in, not from the sky, but from the west. A dust cloud on the horizon signals a contingent of enemy riders, too large to be scouts, too small to be an army. Cao Cao summons you to the command tent as trumpets echo across the plains. No titles, just ink on silk and eyes like steel. They're not here for a fight, he says. They're here for a message. The riders arrive just past noon. Their leader, cloaked in gray, delivers a scroll without dismounting. No greetings. You unroll the message. It's not a threat. It's a challenge. The winner claims a month of uncontested supply control along the river corridor. A duel, not of blades, but of tactics. The rival commander offers a war game. Send 10 men from each side to enact a simulated battle on neutral ground, overseen by agreed observers. You blink. Is this ... legal? He accepts the offer and tasks you with leading the war game team. Cao Cao grins. No, but it's fun. Zun Yu frowns. It's a distraction. You nod, or a trap. Simulated troops are represented with carved tokens. Movements are called, logged, and judged by neutral monks brought in from a local temple, but Cao Cao agrees. Great, no words. She's a woman unexpectedly dressed in crimson robes, face calm as marble. She introduces herself as Commander Lei, strategist under one of the lesser southern lords. You send a lone unit down the western ridge, simulating a supply run. She counters with a choke point and a burning field token, eliminating your advantage. You spend the afternoon selecting your 10 players, 5 seasoned veterans, 3 clever younger officers, and 2 you choose because they think in weird, useful ways. Your actual strike has been building 2 turns back, massed in movements she dismissed as noise. The match is to be played the next day on a flat stretch of earth marked with flags and pebbles. When you arrive at the field, your opponent is already waiting. You exchange brief bows. The game begins. He doesn't cheer, just nods once, enough. You open with a feint, pulling her tokens east while circling a cavalry unit behind. Move by move, your formations clash, bend, reform. You feint, she punishes. She overreaches, you trap. The monks watch in silence, jotting notes on wooden tablets. On the final turn, you gamble everything. Because you notice something during the match, one of her tokens bore a symbol matching the enemy ledger from the raid. She laughs, then her face shifts. She realizes too late that the unit was cover. The final token falls. Your side wins. Cao Cao watches from the hill, arms crossed. Commander Li approaches and offers her hand. Good game, she says. I hope next time it's real. Only if you're on our side, you reply. She smiles, almost sadly. Back at camp, the men celebrate. You don't, not yet. Not a coincidence. You copy it before sleep, carving it lightly into the handle of your fan. Whatever game she's playing, this was only the first round. You barely sleep. When dawn breaks, you're already reviewing maps by candlelight, staring at the symbol you carved into your fan. It matches one from the enemy ledger and one from the game piece Commander Li used. Coincidence is long off the table. You bring your suspicions to Zun Yu. He studies the mark and doesn't speak for a long moment. This symbol, he says finally, was once used by the courier guilds in Jing province, specifically for contracts that could not be spoken aloud. You frown. So it's a mark for silent agreements? He nods. Or for secret buyers or spies? You both look at the fan, and then at each other. She wasn't just playing the game, you murmur. She was using it to send a message. Cao Cao arrives, interrupting the thought. He tosses a fresh scroll onto the table. It's from an allied governor to the north. He's switching sides, just like that. Because they think I'm stretched thin, or distracted, or dying. You unroll the scroll. Neatly written, highly respectful, and utterly final. We're bleeding allies, Cao Cao says. One strange gust of wind and the entire flank could fail. Are you ask? You suggest using the intel from the enemy ledger to strike supply depots in 3 coordinated raids. Sudden, precise, kind like clockwork. Hurt their stomachs before they grow bold enough to bite, he snorts. Not yet. You reach the enemy's outer storage point before dawn and halt. The conversation shifts to action. Cao Cao agrees. He gives you command of the central push straight into the hills, where the enemy thinks you won to risk overextension. You spend the afternoon preparing logistics. Troop rotations, scout routes, weather reports. While briefing your officers, you notice one of them, the formerly demoted map scribe double, checking every line with a ruler. Good, the fear is working. That night, you share a tent with the Vanguard unit. A tight group of 10, all quiet, all tense. You eat boiled millet from a cracked bowl and tell them they're going to make history. One snorts. So did the guy who invented spoons. 50, maybe 60 enemy soldiers emerge from the trees. Still, they smile. Steel. Mud. You're struck on the arm but keep running, blood slick and buzzing. The march begins at moonrise. Through narrow trails, past cold streams and jagged rocks, your force moves like a shadow. No movement, no guards, just silence, too easy. You creep forward, hand on hilt, eyes scanning every window and roof edge. She was setting a rhythm, and you dance to it, and then you see it. A flag on the wall, white cloth with that same courier symbol stitched in black. She knew you come. You whisper for your men to pull back. You've been expected. This isn't a storage depot. It's bait. Before you can retreat, torches erupt across the ridge. You're boxed in. You give the signal anyway. Scatter. West exit. Break through. The next minutes are chaos. Screams. You manage to fall behind a ridge, gasping. 3 of your men follow. The rest uncertain. You don't stop moving. After 2 hours, you reach the second fallback site, cold and soaked, furious. You were outplayed. Historians still argue whether this raid was a blunder or a calculated trap by the enemy. You know the truth. Commander Lai wasn't sending a message. Back at camp, word of the failed raid spreads quickly. No one says it aloud, but the atmosphere changes. You wrap it with linen and grit your teeth. You've bled before, but not like this. Not with so many questions gnawing at your skull. Fewer salutes. Fewer songs by the fires. The silence speaks louder than mourning. You clean your wound yourself. It's shallow, but angry. A clean slice just above the elbow. Cao Cao doesn't blame you. That's what makes it worse. He simply nods when you report and says, now we know the shape of her thinking. Which means she knows ours. Scouts are sent in odd numbers. Patrols no longer follow predictable loops. You switch signal codes, alter gate rotations, even rotate fire pit times so cooking smells don't betray troop strength. Zanyu is less gentle. You let her write the rhythm. Now you must break it. You spend the rest of the day reworking every route, every schedule. Women, children, elderly. They carry tokens from the villages to the east, claiming their lands have been stripped by a rogue detachment. Cao Cao sends a patrol to confirm. The camp becomes chaos, and it works. For 3 days, the enemy doesn't move. No scouts, no skirmishes, just silence. Then, on the 4th night, a small group of refugees arrives. Hours later, they return ashen-faced. The villages were burned, and left behind, carved into the charred walls of a temple, is the Courier Guild symbol. Commander Lee again. You stand in the blackened remains of a shrine the next day, surrounded by ash and prayer stones. The villagers who survived say she came not to loot, but to punish. To the commanders in charge, they had supplied you with grain. They paid the price. She doesn't need an army, you mutter. She needs a pen and firewood. Cao Cao walks beside you. This is not war. This is conversation. Just banners left behind bearing your own mark symbol, sharp, unmistakable. You understand. Every raid, every maneuver, every gesture is part of a long dialogue. You just forgot she was still speaking. Back at camp, you draft your response. You choose 3 targets outposts connected to her command through rumor and resource flow. Not vital, but symbolic. One was where she trained, another is her uncle's estate. The last, a minor fortress flying no banner, but known to harbor her runners. No more misdirection, no more feints. You send real troops with real orders, and you send a letter with each force. Not to her. Each letter ends the same way. Your silence has been answered. The attacks begin simultaneously at dusk. By morning, the outposts are reduced to rubble. No prisoners. When word returns to camp, you feel nothing. Not pride, not regret, just readiness. That night, a new scroll appears on your table. No courier, no rider, just the mark. Inside, a poem, inked in black. 4 lines. Strike as thunder falls. Speak in flame and silence both. I offered you a mirror. You shattered it, no signature. You read it twice, then burn it. She's done talking. So are you. The final preparations begin before sunrise. No horns. No banners. Just quiet movement under the gray light of dawn. You walk the perimeter of the command tent one last time, checking supplies, messengers, and signal flags. Every detail feels heavier today, like the camp itself knows the end is near, not of the war. Just the stance. Cao Cao joins you near the ridge, where scouts report enemy movement finally. They're carrying bundles of dried lotus reeds, soaked in oil, ready to set the shoreline ablaze. Commander Lee has consolidated her forces near the river crossing. It's a calculated risk. She wants to defend the high ground and force you to attack uphill. But that's not your plan. You've already sent a detachment west, looping behind her camp under the cover of mist and misleading trails. Your job is to keep her eyes forward. You send the first wave just before noon. Drums beat in short bursts. Enough to say, we're coming, not enough to say how many. The soldiers march in formation, but with gaps designed to mimic a fractured force. A bluff wrapped in truth. Smoke curls upward, and panic spreads through the enemy rear. Supply carts topple, tents burn. You see the chaos from your ridge and signal the second wave. She responds quickly. Archers take position. Cavalry holds tight. She's too smart to chase ghosts. Steel clashes with steel. You don't think, you just move. Then your fire team strikes. The reeds ignite fast. Her cloak flaps like a torn banner. Around her, her troops hold the line disciplined, desperate. We won, he says. A full assault. You ride down the slope with your men, the wind at your back, and the stench of oil smoke thick in your lungs. Until you see her. Your tent smells of damp cloth and victory laced with fatigue. The edges are worn now. Commander Lee stands atop a crate near the river's edge, directing orders with calm precision. You charge toward her. She sees you coming, doesn't run. But a rider slams into your flank before you reach her. You fall, roll, and land hard. By the time you regain your feet, she's gone. Not dead, not captured. Gone. The battle ends by dusk. Her forces scatter, half fleeing, half surrendering. Smoke still rises from the riverside. The fire didn't consume everything, but it cut deep. You stand in the mud, heart pounding, blade dripping, and feel unfinished. Cao Cao rides up beside you, face smudged with ash. You nod. Did we? He doesn't answer. Back at camp, wounded or treated. The dead are counted. You sit alone, staring at the crack in your fan's handle, the one where you carved her symbol. That night, a final package arrives. No scroll, no poem. Just a piece of carved wood, a lotus blossom half charred. No note, no explanation. You hold it until dawn. Whatever this war was between you and her, it is now over. Maybe. The battle is over, but your thoughts keep moving, like waves refusing to rest after the tide has pulled back. You lie on your cot, the lotus carving resting in your palm, still carrying the scent of smoke and lacquer. The camp is quiet now. No celebration, no mourning. Just the low murmur of men asleep and the distant creak of banners swaying in the early morning wind. Outside your tent, the sky begins to soften from black to charcoal, then to blue-gray. The stars fade slowly, as if reluctant to surrender the stage. Each breath pulls you further from the fire, further from the charge, further from the sharp clarity of command. The air is cooler now, softer, like cloth folding around your limbs, urging you to release the weight you've carried. You listen to the faint rustle of fabric, the crackle of ash settling in fire pits, and the far-off hoot of an owl that has outstayed the night. You do not admire her. You simply remember her. The fan in your hand is cracked, the carving worn, the lotus half burned. The pain in your arm, a dull pressure against sleep. Everything carries a mark now. You breathe deeply, let it out slower than you drew it in. You think of Commander Lee's face in the dust, in the firelight, in silence. You do not hate her, and then you begin to forget. Let the war slip from your fingers like water through a cracked fan. It has no more questions for you tonight. The ridge becomes a memory, the strategy, a shadow. Let the fires go out now. Let the banners fall. Only rest, only silence, only sleep,